Now, because the real field of climate change has been virtually abandoned by scientists in the UK and the US, that means the whole field is wide open from any scientist from anywhere else who wants to go into it, get into it, rip the whole thing to shreds, and smash the CO2 nonsense for the fraud that it is. Now, the funding in the UK, the US, and Australia, Canada too, it's just all CO2. That's all they think about. They're fixated on this CO2, even though CO2 does nothing at all to the climate, doesn't influence the climate or climate change at all, or global warming. It makes no difference. But they're still fixated on it. It's all funded. So here we step in with other guys. So we've got a couple of Danish guys here stepping in, Frank Lansner and Jens Pedersen. Paper just released. It's called Temperature Trends with Reduced Impact of Ocean Temperature. Now I'll just read the abstract so you get some idea what it's about. Temperature data 1900 to 2010 from meteorological stations across the world has been analysed, and it's been found that all land areas generally have two valid temperature trends. Coastal stations and hill stations facing ocean winds are normally more warm trended than the valley stations that are sheltered from dominant ocean winds. Thus, we found that in any area with variation in the topography, we can divide the stations into warmer trended ocean affected stations and the more cold trended ocean air sheltered stations. We found that the distinction between the ocean air affected and ocean air sheltered stations can be used to identify the influence of the oceans on land surface. We can then use this knowledge as a tool to better study climate variability on the land surface without the moderating effects of the ocean. We found a lack of warming in the ocean air sheltered temperature data with less impact of ocean temperature trends after 1950. The lack of warming in the ocean air sheltered temperature trends after 1950 should be considered when evaluating the climatic effects of changes in the Earth's atmospheric trace amounts of greenhouse gases as well as variations in solar conditions. Now these guys are pretty smart to think of this, to think of separating land areas from each other as far as whether they're ocean affected areas or non-ocean air affected areas. Now I found a comment online by Frank Lansner. This is what he said: the little ice age centuries led to a very cold ocean around 1900-1920, and so ocean and ocean affected stations were not able to show the warming around 1920-1930 so well. The oceans kept the warming hidden to some degree. Ocean temperature rise was somewhat delayed for decades, it appears. That's why ocean temperatures do not well reflect the heat balance over the Earth 1920-1950. Unlike ocean air sheltered areas in valleys that reflected the change in heat balance rapidly. Thus it appears that ocean air sheltered data are the data best suited for evaluating the heat balance over the Earth. So what he's saying basically, this is his graph that he produces from the two separate data sets in separate areas. So the ocean is not going to warm up with the warming Earth as fast as you might think it should, as fast as the land does. And so this is why the ocean temperatures do not reflect the heat balance over the Earth. So the heat balance over the Earth from 1920 to 1950 reflected that, on land, that the Earth heated up quite a bit. Now what it's saying is the ocean affected areas of the land, which is in red there, did not heat up so rapidly as the non-ocean affected areas of the land did, which is in blue. So obviously the ocean keeps that inertia, the coldness that's been there for centuries through the little ice age, and it's just kept that, and the ocean is only warming slowly, even though you've got a large amount of heat input into the climate system in the 20s and 30s from the peak of the Yoshimura, the 61-year Yoshimura. We've got another peak in the Yoshimura now, around about 2000, 2010 period. But still, it's not as warm in the non-ocean affected areas of the land as it was in the 1930s. That's quite clear from the graph. Now then, if we actually look at the regions alone, the non-ocean affected land regions, this includes 433 thermometer stations which are ocean air sheltered, classified as ocean air sheltered, so not affected by ocean. Includes Scandinavia, Balkans, USA, Siberia, China, central areas, Pakistan, India, Sahel, Southeast Australia and Southern Africa. So we can see from this graph that you've got, of course, the Yoshimura cycle. You've got other cycles underlying, such as the Bond, the Gleisberg, and the Bray, longer term cycles. And this is what we care about because this is land temperatures. We don't live in the oceans, we live on the land. And land temperatures now are roughly similar to what land temperatures were in the 1930s, non-ocean affected land areas. So the underlying rise in temperature that is supposedly in the global data set has disappeared. This is what the alarmists have been tying up with this rising CO2, saying, well, CO2's caused it all. Well, in fact, you can see from these non-ocean affected areas of land that there is no warming trend whatever from 1900 to the present. In locations best sheltered and protected against ocean air influence, the vast majority of thermometers' worldwide trends show temperatures in recent decades rather similar to the 1920 to 1950 period. Well, this is clearly a problem, for the CO2 drives global warming. The CO2 atmospheric content has risen dramatically. That's been measured, at least since 1958, we know that for certain. So where's the warming associated with that is supposed to be caused by the CO2 increase? Where's the dangerous warming? Or in fact, where's any warming on land that's supposed to come from the increased CO2 in the atmosphere? So this is a real problem for the greenhouse gas hypothesis.